Today, we're going to learn about JavaScript arrays and how to mess around with them. Let's get started. Hey there everyone, welcome back to Loop Coding Center's Web Dev series. Today, we'll be focusing on specifically on the subject of arrays in JavaScript. Last week we worked on methods, and previous to that, functions and classification through the means of creating a object. So with these two things, we melded them together, created the object with the method inside of it. Today, we'll switch focus to an easier version of object classification. Instead of making an object in this instance, we'll just make a list of things. Because I, for some reason, passed over this, and I think it's important to touch on how arrays work in JavaScript, as well as how they can be a very useful tool when it comes to organizing material, as well as running algorithms and or just the utilization of the storage of the items that you place inside of the array. So with that, let's go ahead and jump directly into the setup that we'll need for today. Today's setup should be pretty simple and about as quick as this video will be. Today's video today's video will be a little bit more bite-sized since there isn't as much to eat or chew off of in terms of material we can learn. However, there is ways we can utilize this content. So, start off with a blank JavaScript file inside of CodePen, and that should be all we need for today. So, how exactly does an array work? Well, to be straightforward, an array is literally just another form of a variable. In this instance, this variable stores information in a way similar to our objects in terms of how you can define a class, as well as the information that's stored in them. So with this, let's go ahead and define a variable. So begin with a var, not literally a var, but var for variable. Continue with what we're going to make. So in this instance, my variable will be my shopping list for my groceries. So shopping list like so. And here, I'll set it equal to the value of some square brackets, not curly, and in this instance, provide it the items that I want to have on my shopping list. So basics, we'll make a cake, we'll add some milk, semicolon for another item, then we'll add eggs and flour. Now, this makeup right here for what we're building is something that a lot of programmers might be familiar with. Here, we'll run into some really old and boring programming jokes, but even with that, we have, with this statement, our array. And as simple as that, there's no need for the classification of each value. All we need is to enter the values. The interpreting of the values comes up to us. So with that, let's go ahead and figure out what we can do with this. So to begin our little experiment, why don't we start off by figuring out how we can actually utilize and or get the data that is stored inside of our array. To do this, we can go ahead and fall back on our trusty friend console.log. That way we have information that we can at least find and or visualize in a manner. So should be opening up, I believe. There we go, just took a second. But with that, we're in our console, and here I'll go ahead and add the value of our shopping list. This will be similar to what we were to the method we had to use, or the approach we had to use in order to print out our variables that were inside of our object, and in order to pull the classes out. So, and actually it's the same approach we took when we were using the methods that were placed inside of our object in the previous episode. So with this, I'll go ahead and set up shopping list, and then we'll print out a value inside of the shopping list. So here, with these brackets and this syntax, you can see that it prints out my whole list for me. We caught an error that second time. Not sure why that's happening. But even with that, let's go ahead and say we only want to retrieve the eggs. So with this, I'll go ahead and if you think I should put in number 2, because it's the second in the list, we'll land on our first really bad programming joke that every instructor will make. And I'm not even going to make it. All you need to know is that 0 is the first position in this instance. So if we want milk, we place the value of 0. If we want eggs, the value of 1. And then so on for however long your list is. And with that, we have and you see that if I put in 3, we get undefined because that object doesn't exist. So with that, we have our first use and or just example of how to access the information from our array. Now, to continue our practice with the shopping list, and today we'll keep it very simple by just calling and using concatenation, material we already know. We'll go ahead and make a little string and or printout for this instance. So in this case, I'll go ahead and start off my sentence with my shopping list includes, place a space after that, then a plus to add the next string, which will be our first item on the list. And then alongside that, what we can do is set the other items we have as well. And as you can see, we slowly have a list forming. And here we will add our final shopping list item. Make sure to put in the correct state and or index of our item, because really what we're doing is calling for the index of certain numbers. And with this, we have our shopping list. My shopping list includes, but that's a little sloppy. So what we'll do is go ahead and add another plus along with a space in between. And here, just like this, we have our full sentence of my shopping list includes milk, eggs, and flour. And like that, we have a use of our variable already. Now, this isn't really anything fancy, isn't really anything impressive. But in this upcoming episode, in this next week, we'll actually look into some specific methods that are directly built into JavaScript that allow for us to mess with these arrays in really interesting ways, and ways that will actually follow you along your entire programming journey. So with that, I'd like to end today's episode, and to quickly review, we learned how to define the new type of variable, which is an array, through a standard statement. We learned how to print out the specific items within an array based on the index. And we learned how, well, we didn't really learn, but we continued with concatenation. But next week we'll continue with working in arrays and the methods we can use to adjust and or modify them. So until then, have a nice week.